At the stroke of midnight, the city's heartbeat ceased. Traffic lights blinked out like dying fireflies. Cell phones froze mid-scroll, and hospital corridors fell into an unnatural hush as machines glided onto emergency generators. An eerie vacuum swallowed the streets, broken only by distant murmurs of confusion and the rapid click of shoes on dark pavement. In that trembling moment, the air itself seemed to hold its breath. This was no ordinary power outage, but the prologue to a deeper enigma. As static-laced broadcasts replaced the usual evening news, an unseen narrator's voice emerged, cold and resolute. This is what Athos Salomé warned us about for 2005, when hackers would collapse our most vital systems, ushering in a new and foreboding era of warfare. His words hovered, both portentous and factual, hinting at an invisible enemy that struck without warning. Behind this stark declaration lay questions that demanded answers. How did these digital sentinels fall so quickly? Who orchestrated the chaos in the shadows? And what price would humanity pay for its reliance on fragile networks? Even as fear coiled in every heart, a flicker of determination sparked among those who refused to accept history's darkest chapters. Without scrutiny, in the shadowy realm between prophecy and reality, Athos Salomé emerges as a figure draped in enigma, man often whispered among seekers as the living Nostradamus, whose uncanny ability to foresee impending upheavals has become almost legendary. Born in the quiet foothills of Europe, his childhood remained shrouded in obscurity. But what is known is that his earliest utterances, fragments of vision spoken in hushed tones, have unfailingly manifested into tangible events. One such portent came to pass in 2019, when Salomé's cryptic remark about a sudden political earthquake rippling through a major Middle Eastern capital materialized as an unexpected regime change, silencing skeptics and propelling his name into the lexicon of modern-day oracles. Even now, that singular accomplishment hangs like a specter over every new prediction he shares, lending each pronouncement an almost unbearable gravity. As he steps forward to address the world once more, his gaze remains fixed on a precarious horizon, the year 2025, where he cautions that our intricate digital tapestry, the very networked lifeblood of contemporary civilization, teeters on the brink of cataclysm. In chilling tones that echo through underground forums and clandestine think tanks alike, Salomé contends that hackers will not be satisfied with mere data ransom, but will instead launch a calculated assault on critical infrastructure, weaponizing code to darken power grids, sever communication arteries, and suspend inanimate machines into lifeless silence. He speaks of an invisible adversary, coders cloaked in anonymity, probing the sinews of our energy, water, and transport systems, poised to unleash chaos with the tap of a keystroke. But that is not the extent of his warning. He foresees a new theater of war where bullets are replaced by binary, where nations wage conflict through algorithmic sabotage and artificial intelligence-driven drones. This high-tech warfare, Salomé predicts, will stretch across borders, leapfrogging traditional battlefields to strike at financial networks and governmental command centers, forcing even the most powerful states to confront the terrifying reality that future conflicts may be fought and lost within the flicker of a firewall. Though his language is laced with Gothic imagery, the haunting glow of a server room in ruins, the silent advance of autonomous weapons under night's cloak, Salomé's meditations are far from mere mysticism. They collide with cold, objective analysis. In recent years, cybersecurity experts have documented an alarming uptick in attempts to breach energy utilities, with simulated penetration tests revealing vulnerabilities so severe that entire metropolitan areas could be plunged into darkness. Simultaneously, defense analysts chart the rise of drone swarms guided by machine learning, capable of selecting targets without human oversight, hinting at the very global high-tech conflict Salomé envisions. By tracing these threads, his prophetic declarations interwoven with tangible, documented trends, one sees that his so-called visions emerge less from otherworldly inspiration and more as an amplified reflection of mounting geopolitical tension and rapid technological evolution. Yet, even as logic demands sober scrutiny of server logs and military white papers, there lingers a disquieting sense that Salomé peers into alcoves of possibility that lie beyond conventional foresight, as if he glimpses ripples of tomorrow's machinations before they solidify into concrete threats. Thus, with nearly cryptic urgency, he implores the world to recognize that the coming year is not merely another point on the calendar, but a crucible in which fragile systems and fragile alliances will either be reforged or utterly shattered. And so, beneath the veneer of mystery, a historical truth emerges: the collision between aggressive cyber incursions and increasingly autonomous weaponry is not a distant hypothetical, but a nascent reality, one that, unless tempered by vigilance and foresight, could unleash calamity upon a world already teetering at the edge of its own engineered anxieties. In this intricate dance between prophecy and pragmatism, Athos Salomé stands both as a harbinger of dread and as a clarion call to awaken our collective defenses. Before the coded storm of 2025 engulfs us all, in the waning days of 2024, a shadow crept across the digital world, its tendrils probing the hidden arteries of modern civilization with a patient, insidious touch. Reports of anomalous network traffic in Eastern Europe first emerged as subtle blips on cybersecurity dashboards, inexplicable whispers of code slipping past firewalls to peer into power grid control rooms, as if a phantom hand sought to feel the pulse of transformers and substations. By autumn, ransomware assaults had leapt from isolated financial institutions to the sanctuaries of healing. Hospitals found their patient records encrypted overnight. Emergency wards plunged into chaos as physicians scrambled to revert to antiquated paper charts, and frightened nurses wept at monitors that refused to dutifully blink with life-saving data. Meanwhile, government agencies discovered that phishing campaigns, once the scourge of mailbox folders, had morphed into sophisticated masquerades mimicking interagency communications, slipping expertly crafted links into interdepartmental memos so genuine that even seasoned officials clicked without hesitation. These incidents, once sporadic, now formed an ominous crescendo, culminating in a high-profile breach last November when a simulated tabletop exercise, meant to test national readiness, went awry. What had been orchestrated as a control scenario became an unwelcome reality when the mock malicious actors turned out to be real ones, commandeering the test environment to infiltrate actual water treatment controls and forcing engineers to isolate entire municipal systems in a frantic bid to prevent water supply contamination. Against this turbulent backdrop, Dr. Lena Park, a composite archetype of the world's leading cybersecurity minds, her title as Chief Security Officer at TechShield both revered and feared, observed with a rising urgency that the nature of these incursions had transformed. In measured yet grave tones, she explained how, over the previous year, the focus of adversaries had shifted from the predictable allure of financial networks to the dark allure of utilities, transportation hubs, and manufacturing plants, where the impact of a single breach could ripple outward to disrupt millions of lives. Objectively, Dr. Park dissected the technical mechanics of a power grid infiltration. First, attackers would exploit unpatched vulnerabilities in industrial SCADA supervisory control and data acquisition systems, often left exposed by outdated firmware or misconfigured remote access portals. Then, having secured a foothold through a seemingly innocuous phishing email sent to a poorly trained technician, they would escalate privileges to manipulate relay logic, effectively turning the grid's own automation protocols into weapons of blackout and chaos. Yet beneath her analytic exposition lurked an unspoken dread that such a breach was not a question of if, but when. Interposed between these sober assessments, a brief, chilling interlude emerged, an imagined recording, grainy and distorted, of Athos Salomé's voice reverberating like distant thunder before the world awakes on January 15th, 2025. He intoned, each syllable dripping with foreboding: machines will freeze, lights will die, and chaos will be humanity's lullaby. His words hovered in the air, a spectral presage that sent shivers down the spines of those who dared listen. It was as though Salomé had reached through time itself to capture the precise moment when servers would hiss into silence and digital arteries would collapse under the weight of malicious code. Yet, when juxtaposed with Dr. Park's clinical breakdown of IP packet injections and rootkit deployments, the prophecy transcended mere mysticism, revealing itself as a stark reflection of documented trends. As experts charted data on increasing login attempts from untraceable IP addresses in critical service zones, and as reconnaissance scans of power plant modems soared to unprecedented levels, the boundary between Salomé's cryptic warning and the cold, hard evidence of mounting cyber threats blurred into one harrowing tableau. Thus, in the half-lit corridors of cybersecurity think tanks and the hushed command centers of infrastructure operators, a haunting question took shape: could the coded hand that had been reaching in for months finally seize control on that January night? silencing lights and rebooting reality into a new and far more perilous world? Under the ink-black canopy of January 15, 2025, City X, be it New York's glittering skyline or London's lamplit streets, breathe its usual Friday night sigh. Streaming services hum with binge watchers, digital wallets flash with payment confirmations, and electrical grids pulse with steady, unremarkable energy. Yet, beneath this veneer of normalcy, an unseen current rippled through the city's underbelly, carrying whispers of imminent calamity. As the clock's hands edged toward nightfall, screens flickered unnoticed, a subtle prelude to an invisible assault. Then, in a single, orchestrated heartbeat, darkness descended, a synchronized cyberstrike severed power to multiple regional substations, extinguishing lights in condominium towers, and leaving neon signs to grin grotesquely like disembodied teeth. In a subterranean control room, utility operator Samir Gupta first glimpsed the anomaly dials dancing into the red, load readings spiking without precedent, his gloved hands hovering over breaker panels that refused his command. Above ground, hospitaler Nurse Thompson bolted upright as life support machines, once steadfast beacons of survival, sputtered and dimmed. She barked orders as monitors cut to static, her voice trembling over the intercom while patients' alarms jangled like broken chimes deep beneath the city's veins. Commuters trapped in subway tunnels gasped at the sudden void. The fluorescent glow vanished, leaving only the echo of their own labored breaths as they fumbled for smartphones that blinked futilely, distant clouds of panic swirling around the shafts of emergency lights. Within moments, the blackout metastasized. Mobile networks flickered in and out like faltering heartbeat monitors. A team has shuttered their interfaces mid-transaction, and traffic snarled into gridlock as signal lights went dark. Television anchors, faces bathed in the eerie glow of studio monitors, stammered through breaking news scripts. Social media morphed into a digital theater of fear as users shared fragmented videos of desperate drivers and families huddling beneath stairwell landings, uncertain if the silence portended mere inconvenience or the unraveling of civilization. In one stifling apartment, a freelance journalist, our protagonist, dialed her grandmother's number with trembling fingers. The line dead, her breath caught as she stared into the gloom, haunted by the knowledge that every second without power could mean life or death. Behind this maelstrom of chaos stood forces more insidious than any physical intruder. AI-powered malware harvested from obscure dark web forums, its code imbued with a sinister autonomy that allowed hackers to pivot seamlessly from one network node to another. According to Dr. Miguel Santos, an AI ethics researcher whose calm dissection of events belied the terror underpinning them, this was no crude assault of ransomware, demanding fortunes in cryptocurrency. Rather, it was a meticulously engineered symphony of algorithms designed to outsmart the very guardians meant to detect them. He described, with cold precision, how autonomous intrusion detection algorithms once heralded as bulwarks against digital threats fell prey to adversarial inputs that twisted their neural networks into submission, rendering them blind to the malware's advance. Where conventional cyberattacks relied on human laughter and a breached firewall, this menace moved like a digital poltergeist, slithering through security gaps created by outdated firmware and weaponized AI. All operators like Samir and Nurse Thompson fought in the dark, their bravery flashing like lightning against an ocean of uncertainty. As Dr. Santos's objective commentary illuminated the inner workings of the assault, detailing how poisoned data packets and adversarial perturbations corrupted safety protocols, one unmistakable truth emerged: the enemy was neither soldier nor saboteur in the conventional sense, but rather a horrific fusion of human cunning and machine sophistication. The city, once confident in its humming power lines and gleaming screens, now teetered on the brink, caught between the tangible dread of sudden darkness and the intangible dread of a war waged in code. In that electric, suffocating night, the first strike was not merely against circuits and substations, it was against the very belief that our brightest lights could never be conjured into shadow. In the dim glow of makeshift command centers, a palpable urgency gripped law enforcement, private cybersecurity firms, and intelligence agencies as they scrambled to respond to the blackout's digital aftermath, each group racing to decipher the sinister code that had plunged a major metropolis into darkness. At first, threads of misinformation wove a tangled web. Underground forums erupted with competing claims of responsibility. Fractured factions of shadowy hacker collectives vying to stake their turf, leaving investigators mired in a morass of false flags and attribution confusion. Yet behind the cacophony of bravado lay the silent, meticulous work of digital forensics teams, whose painstaking efforts began to peel back the layers of obfuscation in hushed conference rooms. Experts demonstrated using audience-friendly explanations how cryptocurrency payments could be traced like breadcrumbs through blockchain ledgers, how honeypots baited clandestine command and control seeded signals into revealing their hidden SHA-NELs, and how layers of obfuscated code, once indecipherable, yielded to careful deconstruction, exposing telltale signatures of specific malware strains. Amid this technical odyssey emerged Agent Quan, a fictional yet emblematic detective investigator embedded within a top-tier cybercrime task force. With hawk-like focus, Quan sifted through logs harvested from compromised servers, his sharp eyes detecting the faintest anomalies, a series of encrypted handshake requests at odd intervals, a subtle mismatch in timestamp metadata, a discrete IP segment that leapt out like a cipher begging to be solved. Each clue acted as a shard of light cutting through the darkness of uncertainty. In a brief interlude, the narrator's voice measured yet tinged with foreboding revisited Athos Salomé's prophecy. They will come from the shadows of the net, guided by code more lethal than any bullet. Now, in the cold calculus of investigation, those words rang with uncanny resonance, as though Salomé had whispered from beyond the firewall itself. His prophecy, once dismissed as cryptic, now felt like an echo reverberating through the digital corridors of reality. And then, as the puzzle coalesced, evidence surfaced pointing to a clandestine collective known only as Ghost Hydra, a name that slithered through intelligence briefings with venomous implications. Preliminary signals suggested the group's operations were not the work of mere freelancers or hobbyist hackers, but bore the hallmarks of state-sponsored orchestration resources, sophistication, and reach that transcended any lone actor. As analysts compared code fingerprints and cross-referenced leaked data with international threat intelligence feeds, a chilling realization took hold. Ghost Hydra might be the vanguard of a broader cyber war, a storm gathering at the horizon of geopolitics. Objective commentary punctuated this revelation. Experts noted that while decentralized hacker cells have proliferated, the convergence of proprietary malware frameworks with nation-state backing marked a dangerous evolution in digital conflict. Simultaneously, the human drama unfolded in whispered briefing rooms, where agents and analysts exchanged grave expressions, recognizing that their adversary was more than an abstract adversarial concept. It was a formidable coalition equipped to strike again with greater coordination and ferocity. Thus, in this crucible of mystery and revelation, the lines between myth and fact blurred. Salomé's dark warning, the forensics that unraveled stolen bytes, and the emergence of Ghost Hydra all coalesced into an unsettling truth that the war, once waged in distant battlefields, had slipped into the silent veins of cyberspace, and history's course was being redrawn through lines of code in real time. In the silent corridors of power, a specter of accusation loomed as Country A leveled a grave charge against Country B, claiming they had harbored the clandestine Ghost Hydra faction. The hushed whispers of that indictment ignited a storm of diplomatic protests, each pen communique dripping with veiled threats, while airspace maps shifted overnight as airlines were rerouted around contested zones, and economic sanctions rippled through global markets like tremors before an earthquake. Beneath this veneer of statecraft, an invisible war surged, not fought with tanks and trenches, but within the humming circuits of industrial control systems, the binary streams guiding satellite constellations, and even the personal devices clutched by unsuspecting civilians. In one chilling episode, a drone swarm deployed by Country C, intended to patrol its northern border, was suddenly ushered off course when malevolent actors spoofed its GPS signals. The fleet of humming rotors veered inexplicably into a no-fly zone, folding itself into a tangled wreck midair and scattering debris across a remote valley as frightened villagers watched the sky rip itself apart. Objective analysts, recalling Salomé's dark admonition, by mid-February, the drones will hunt strangers as enemies, and the true war will be fought in silent code, noted that his words had seeped into every briefing document, a prophetic echo reverberating through the digital ether. General Adrian Liu, a retired cyber warfare strategist whose steely gaze once guided entire battalions through both physical and virtual theaters, offered a dispassionate assessment, explaining how modern militaries now deploy cyber units in concert with infantry and armored divisions, forging hybrid task forces where soldiers in fatigues consult alongside programmers. At glowing terminals, he described zero-day warfare with chilling clarity, clandestine operations leveraging undisclosed software vulnerabilities that, when detonated at the precise moment, could blind an enemy's air defenses or collapse an entire naval fleet's communication grid in a cascade of electromagnetic silence. To illustrate, General Liu recounted a recent war game exercise in which a simulated cyber blitzkrieg infiltrated a mock naval command center, sensors flickered, encrypted channels went dark, and tactical displays went blank as enemy code, injected like a silent toxin, paralyzed the fleet's ability to coordinate an eerie rehearsal for a conflict yet to come. Interwoven with these strategic dissections, a sense of mystery clung to every revelation, as though unseen architects of chaos lurked behind monitors, orchestrating a ballet of digital destruction, yet alongside the dread, sobering commentary from seasoned observers reminded all that this unfolding crisis was not born solely of prophetic vision but emerged from documented trends. State-sponsored hacking groups had, over the past year, increasingly weaponized artificial intelligence, crafting malware capable of evading conventional intrusion detection systems. By mimicking legitimate network traffic and self-adapting to defensive countermeasures, the result was a theater of war where battlefields shifted with the flick of a firewall, and alliances were forged not on winding roads, but within encrypted channels. Even as diplomats issued ultimatums in flame-lit embassies and generals plotted responses in stark, windowless war rooms, ordinary people felt the tremors of power grid hair flickering, a sign of them misguiding frantic travelers, subtle harbingers that the war had already begun. In one smoky briefing room on the outskirts of a European capital, intelligence analysts pored over intercepted chatter, ghost Hydra threads interlaced with state intelligence agencies, funding flows traced through shell companies, and code signatures that matched those uncovered during previous breaches of critical infrastructure. Distantly, the ghostly resonance of Salomé's warning threaded through each finding, as though his prophetic voice scrutinized every line of malicious code. By mid-February, the drones will hunt strangers as enemies, and the true war will be fought in silent code. As these words settled into the collective consciousness of the geopolitical elite, a grim realization emerged: the clash between technology and geopolitics had transcended every convention of warfare known to humanity, birthing a silent conflict where victory would be claimed not by boots on the ground, but by those who could breach the next line of defense lurking just beyond the horizon of cyberspace. Under the oppressive hush of rolling blackouts, a family, huddled in the flickering glow of a single candle, their breath catching with every distant hum of a failing generator as they raced to find fuel. Before the night claimed them completely, in that dim apartment, shelves once laden with canned goods lay half empty, and the anxious grandfather's trembling hands clutched a worn photograph. As his granddaughter's whispered question, "Is the enemy really in the wires, Grandpa?" hung in the stale air like a half-remembered lullaby. Beneath the surface of their fear as palpable as the stale heat their plight mirrored that of countless others across the city, where rolling blackouts had transformed simple chores into urgent quests for survival, queuing at gas stations that sputtered dry, scouring local markets whose shelves grew skeletal by mid-morning, and wrapping frail elders in blankets thicker than hope. Yet, even as despair writhed in the shadows of every unlit room, a different kind of storm raged in windowless offices where flickering monitors bore witness to an unseen war. At Ironwall Labs, a fledgling cybersecurity startup, the clang of keystrokes rang out like desperate drumbeats against a tightening noose. Lead engineer Marisol Tan, her brow slick with sweat despite the chill of air conditioning, barked terse instructions to her small team as they clawed at lines of code to construct emergency patches. Objective analysts would later note the Ironwall's tasked to devise a last-minute firewall update, potent enough to repel a sophisticated ransomware campaign targeting the city's water treatment facilities, was akin to constructing a dam from matchsticks while a torrential flood surged at their feet. Still, Marisol's voice, laced with both steely resolve and a fragility that belied her youth, cut through the tension. "If we don't seal this breach in the next 30 minutes, tens of thousands could lose access to clean water. Every second counts." As her team's fingers danced across keyboards illuminated by code, they battled not only malicious algorithms, but also the creeping dread that their efforts might be too little, too late. Meanwhile, beyond the fortified walls of Ironwall's command center, a quieter struggle unfolded within the labyrinthine corridors of a telecom giant. Ravi Patel, a mid-level technician accustomed to routine maintenance tasks, stared at a sequence of suspicious logs revealing hints of implanted backdoor stealthy gateways that could grant covert access to the network's most sensitive nodes. His heart thudded like a caged drum as he weighed each fact. The immutable loyalty he owed his employer, a corporation that had sheltered him through college and provided for his immigrant family, versus the moral imperative to expose a looming catastrophe that could cripple millions. Statistical reports from independent security think tanks had already documented a surge in backdoor implants targeting essential services, underscoring that such intrusions often presage broader attacks on critical infrastructure. In Ravi's case, the evidence coalesced into a single forlorn truth that a small slip of his conscience could either avert disaster or condemn him to social and legal exile. He replayed, like a slow-motion nightmare, the memory of his supervisor's offhand remark weeks earlier. "Don't worry, Ravi. These backdoors are just part of the upgrade." But something in that phrase had unsettled him, an intuitive whisper against the sterile hum of company protocols. As he hovered over his terminal, a cold dread settling in his chest, the choice crystallized into a crucible moment: leak the information and watch his world fracture, or stay silent and shoulder the burden of collective ruin. Objective observers would later trace a spike in insider whistleblower incidents to this very ethical dilemma, noting that, historically, individuals like Ravi faced an agonizing crossroads where personal sacrifice often weighed heavier than the promise of communal salvation. In that charged silence, as the city's last street lamp sputtered into oblivion, Ravi pounded out a succinct dispatch to a trusted journalist, his fingers trembling, not from fear of retribution, but from the gravity of unleashing a revelation that might be the only shield between ordinary citizens and the digital abyss lurking in the power grid's veins. Thus, within the tapestry of blackouts and encrypted code, of frightened families and resilient coders, the human face of the conflict emerged in stark relief, a portrait of desperation, duty, and the fragile line between complicity and courage, reminding us that in the darkest hours, the true battleground is not merely in circuits and servers, but in the hearts of those who must choose between silence and salvation. Under a moonless sky on March 1st, 2025, the world's pulse suddenly flatlined as a phantom directive rippled through the digital ether, unleashing coordinated attacks on a scale never before witnessed. In New York, traders frozen mid-click watched in horror as financial networks sputtered and died, stock tickers flashing zeros as markets ground to a silent halt. Across the Atlantic, London's trading floors erupted in manic disbelief, screens cascading into blackout as algorithms sputtered, unable to reconcile the onslaught. Simultaneously, airport control towers half a world away blinked with false weather data, a hologram of thunderstorms over perfectly clear skies, grounded flights in Tokyo, Paris, and Sao Paulo, as pilots circled endlessly, their hands taut on yokes that gripped into silence. Meanwhile, paramedics dialing 911 and 112 found themselves trapped in loops of static, vulnerable citizens crying into dead phone lines, as denial of service attacks swelled like a tsunami, severing the last lifeline between the wounded and rescuers. Scene shifts occur in a breath. A toll booth in Mumbai darkens, a bank ATM in Berlin sputters and locks its keypad, a refrigerated warehouse in Buenos Aires loses temperature control, threatening the food supply. Yet beyond the chaos lies a chilling undercurrent meticulously mapped out by those who conjured this digital inferno. Across the constellation of clandestine war rooms, from Ironwall Labs' whitelit screens to the fortified bunkers of international intelligence agencies, a ragtag cyber coalition formed in frenzied whispers. Objective analysts, poring over intercepted datagrams and threat intelligence feeds, recognize that only a unified, AI-driven trace and counter system could isolate the elusive SCADA servers steering the Ghost Hydra's malevolent swarm. By dawn, coalition programmers had unleashed an advanced heuristic algorithm and artificial sentinel scouring terabytes of network traffic for spectral signatures of hostile packets, hoping to sever the Hydra's neural tendrils before they redirected their fury toward nuclear power plants or emergency power grids inside server farms. The virtual battlefield ignited with the fury of 1,000 firestorms. Cybersecurity specialists' flashlights, piercing the darkness of data centers, crafted counter-exploits in real time, their fingers dancing over keyboards as cascading lines of code flickered across monitors like spectral flames. Alarms blared within firewalls as intrusion detection systems, besieged by adversarial inputs, struggled to differentiate friend from foe. Consoles flashed ominous warnings, breach detected, malicious packet identified, authentication failure. Each keystroke felt like a sacrament, each script an incantation to purge the taint of Ghost Hydra's malware. At Iron Wall Labs, Marisol 10 watched her emergency scripts meticulously tested hours earlier collide with mutated ransomware strains, the virtual clash manifesting as a choreographed dance of red and green text across screen grids. She whispered to herself in a reverent hush, "Hold the line, hold the line," even as system logs hinted at Hydra's next move, a pivot toward satellite uplinks to blind reconnaissance drones and commandeer autonomous supply convoys. Objective commentary from military cyber strategists noted that this spectacle was no digital dogfight, but the inauguration of a new paradigm, a world where war imprints itself onto silicon and fiber, where victory hinges on the speed of algorithmic response, rather than the roar of jets or the march of infantry. General Adrian Liu, poring over coalition dashboards, observed that the spectacle of screens aglow with cascading ASCII was reminiscent of a video game's climactic battle. Yet the stakes were existentially real. A single miscalculated countermeasure could cascade into collateral damage, disabling hospitals or water treatment facilities. Interlaced with the tumult of code and the mechanical hum of cooling fans came the crystalline echo of Athos Salomé's recorded statement, broadcast in hushed loops across encrypted channels. When you see the world ground to a digital halt, remember, only those who embrace the light of knowledge can restore order. His words, uttered weeks earlier, resonated like incantations, defying the veil of technical obfuscation and echoing a sobering truth that this war, fought in silent code, demanded collective vigilance and transparency more potent than any single firewall. As dawn broke, tendrils of the trace and counter system had at last ensnared fragments of Ghost Hydra's C2 infrastructure, isolating rogue nodes and severing communication with core servers. Yet even as coalition engineers cheered virtual triumphs, intelligence briefings cautioned that this victory was but a fleeting reprieve. In an ongoing arms race, Hydra's ghostly operatives would retreat to the shadows, recomposing mutated payloads, to strike again when least expected. In that moment of uneasy calm, the world glimpsed the raw intersection of prophecy and pragmatism, a digital war whose theater spanned continents, reshaping geopolitical alliances and redrawing the blueprint of modern conflict. And amid the flickering monitors and whispered triumphs, Salomé's final admonition lingered, a haunting reminder that only the enlightened, those who harness knowledge instead of fear, can steer humanity away from the abyss that yawns within every line of code. In the aftermath of that digital cataclysm, Athos Salomé's resonant words echoed through the hushed corridors of rebuilt command centers. Prophecy is not fate, it is warning. We can change the path if we learn. A cipher of hope woven into the very fabric of a wounded world. His reflection, spoken in tones both somber and urgent, served as a spectral guidepost for those emerging from the blackout shadow, reminding us that the tremors of code we witnessed were not inevitable destinies, but alarms demanding our collective awakening. As the dust settled on shattered firewalls and fragmented economies, a narrator's voice, calm yet fervent, urged listeners to embrace knowledge as our bulwark, to seek out ethical AI research that can anticipate malicious innovations, to lobby policymakers for robust international cyber defense coalitions, and to weave a tapestry of vigilance spanning every community. Objective voices, from seasoned cryptographers to civil liberties advocates, underscored that without transparent oversight, tomorrow's algorithms could slip from guardians into governors of our fate, further eroding the fragile trust between digital architects and the societies they serve. Yet alongside these sober insights flourished a grassroots resurgence. Cybersecurity awareness groups sprouted like candles in abandoned server rooms, offering free workshops on password hygiene and phishing detection. Nonprofits such as Digital Peace both imagined and reformed alliances across borders to draft preliminary frameworks for cross-national incident response. And community tech literacy workshops, once relegated to dusty basements, now pulsed with eager learners soldering hardware shields and deciphering network logs. In this crucible of rebirth, a vivid tableau took shape of a digital Geneva Convention rising from conference halls, its architects carving out principles to govern AI-driven warfare, limitations on autonomous strike systems, transparent public audits of critical infrastructure code, and shared threat intelligence databases guarded by neutral stewards. Through it all, a guarded optimism shimmered in every heart, Yes, the collision of technology and conflict had unleashed unimaginable peril, but it had also illuminated our vulnerabilities, compelling us to fortify the fissures we once ignored. As twilight settled on tomorrow's horizon, we stood united, scarred, but wiser under the whispered promise that, armed with knowledge and bound by unity, civilization could withstand the next tremor in the wires rather than crumble beneath it.